Epilogues 1 and 2. This is an excerpt from the official NASA Procedures for Contact with Intelligent Extraterrestrial Life Manual. Success. Ideally, with your hard work and that of all DEXA employees, successful rapport will be established between our species and the IEL, leading to an exchange of ideas and technology, and ultimately a great new chapter in human history. However, the process certainly will not go perfectly. In fact, there will doubtless be many hitches, hiccups, and mistakes along the way. So try to keep in mind throughout this endeavor that even though it may be troublesome at times, you are participating in one of the greatest moments of our existence, and possibly the existence of the IEL as well. Your efforts here will go down in history, so act accordingly. Be the best representative of humanity that you can possibly be. Epilogue Part 1. Transmission, November 13, 2043, from Dr. Chang Kowalski, PhD, Department of Lunar Science at NASA at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. 2. DeShield Gibson. Subject. Can you take a look at this? Dash, I just took a look at the equations you sent me. Holy cow, I knew you were smart, kiddo, but this is off the charts. We're talking game-changing stuff here. Huge implications for humanity. Now, to be honest, some of this is even a bit beyond me, so I guess it's a good thing you sent it to Dr. Brahmaputra Marquez, too. Together, we've been able to analyze it all, and she is in agreement with me that this is Einstein-quality work. We have to talk about this ASAP. I'm dying to know how you even came up with it. I just tried to call you, but I didn't reach you. I bet you're going surfing or maybe chasing girls. Anyhow, genius, call me immediately when you get this. Chang. Epilogue Part 2. Far-flung destination. Earth year 2075. Bosco Day 1. The planet is bigger than I expected. I'm used to looking at Earth from space, and while the Earth is definitely not small, it is significantly smaller than this. This planet's circumference is about 50% larger than Earth's, which means there's a lot more planet. And nearly the entire surface appears to be water. There is some land, most likely formed in similar ways to the land on Earth by volcanic eruptions and the smashing together of the continental plates. This planet, like Earth, has a dynamic surface. However, the land masses are dwarfed by the oceans, and they are few and far between. Even the biggest mass, the one the size of North America, looks puny compared to the enormous blue sea around it. It's no wonder that intelligent life here stayed in the oceans. I can't believe, after all this time, that I'm finally here. This has been my whole life's work, figuring out how to think myself here. It was evident right after I returned to Earth from MBA that the human space program was never going to get me this far. Not in my lifetime, anyway. Even colonizing our own moon was far more difficult than we'd hoped. It was years until NASA could even get MBA reestablished, and 5 times that before moon-based Beta was up and running, and things still aren't working perfectly there. Interstellar travel might be a possibility someday, but that day is centuries away, if not more. So I've been working at this instead. I've been practicing for decades now, taking what I learned from Zan and combining that with things that I have figured out by myself. I realized, after that time on the moon when Lily Schoberg was trying to kill me, that it was tied to the extreme desire to be someplace else, although it obviously wasn't as simple as wishing yourself there. It was more about channeling that desire, and some extremely complicated subatomic physics. I worked on it all through middle school and high school, making very little progress at first, doing whatever I could to recreate that brief moment when I had made contact with Riley Bach on Hapuna Beach, or when I projected myself to the safety of the airlock. Well, actually, I didn't make any progress at first, but I kept trying because I'd done it twice, and so I knew it was possible. I didn't have any trouble getting into college, given my work on what became known as the Kowalski-Gibson equation. Chang had made some refinements, and although he always tried to give me the bigger share of the credit, he was the famous genius, and I was just a kid, so people tended to assume that he was the brains of the operation. I went into astrophysics and studied under Dr. Brahmaputra Marquez. Together, we made a lot of amazing discoveries about space and time and distance, though I never let her know that I had an ulterior motive throughout. That the only reason I was doing this was to see if I could master thinking myself across the galaxy in the same way that Zan had. The only one I told about that was Violet. She's become a world famous scientist herself, although in a very different way than I have. Violet has always had a flair for the dramatic, and people have always loved to watch her. So it was never a surprise to me that she ultimately became one of the great spokespeople for science, lecturing to huge crowds at conferences, hosting the fifth incarnation of Cosmos, and making the occasional cameo in the Star Trek movies. Violet is the only one who has ever known about Zan besides me. She never had the chance to think herself any place the way I did, but she always accepted that it was possible, and she worked at it with me. It took decades, but eventually, one day long after we had returned to Earth from the moon, when we were both home visiting Mom and Dad in Hawaii, I thought myself across the house to her mind. Now, in a sense, figuring that out was the hardest part, because once I knew how to do it, I simply had to hone the skills. And after a while, I could think myself across much larger spaces to Violet, and then from one side of the Earth to the other, and then I could project myself into other minds as well: dogs, rabbits, wildebeests. And Zan was right. Wildebeests don't have much going on, although communicating with dolphins was amazing. Occasionally, I could think myself to another person, but I had to be careful about that, because I didn't really want other people to know that I could do it. I figured it would be way too unsettling, or that the CIA might try to recruit me to work for them. I never even told Riley what I'd done. She simply assumed that she'd dreamed my visit to her that one day on the beach, and I always let her believe that that was true. It was much easier than explaining what had really happened. I still dropped into her mind from time to time, though, just to freak her out and make her think she was having visions of me. So I had mostly communicated to Violet, and after a while she had learned how to do it and think herself back to me. She wasn't as good as I was, but we definitely got to the point that we did need a telephone. Although we still use the phone most of the time, because thinking yourself into another person's mind is always a little weird, and there is always the chance that I might accidentally appear to Violet while she was on the toilet, or vice versa. And now, after all those years of hard work, those hundreds of thousands of hours of practice, it has all finally paid off. Bosco's star is hotter than the sun, so the planet's atmosphere is sweltering. The seas are wonderfully warm. While I can sense the water, I can't really analyze it, but it seems to be exactly the same as water on Earth, or at least it should be. There aren't that many forms of water in the universe. The sea life is wildly different, however. At first glance, it all looks vaguely like life on Earth. After all, in our own seas, there is a tremendous variety of life in all shapes and sizes, ranging from sharks to starfish to sea cucumbers. But when the life forms come closer, I realize that each and every one of them is like nothing I have ever seen before, and occasionally like nothing I or anyone else has ever imagined. Some of them are gloriously beautiful, while others are the stuff that nightmares are made of. But it is all amazing and incredible and overwhelming. Kira, who is now a marine biologist, would go out of her mind. Kira is an expert on humpback whales, as well as one of the Earth's most aggressive environmental activists, leading rallies and protests all over the world. And though it has never been proven, I'm pretty sure she was behind the suspicious sinking of several corporate whaling ships. Kira has never been a big fan of following the rules, especially when they stand in the way of what's right. For now, I don't bother to focus too much on the life around me. Hopefully there will be plenty of time for that in the future. In the meantime, I'm on a mission. I plunge onward through the seas, thinking myself forward, homing in on the signal that I know by heart, the signal that is called to me from all the way across the galaxy. As I get closer to it, I begin to see signs of intelligent life. There are structures under the sea, but structures far different than anything we have on Earth. Instead of bending nature to their will the way we humans have done by cutting down forests and paving the land, These creatures have built things in harmony with the natural world. Their buildings aren't blocks of concrete and steel, but seem to be made of crystals and films of bubbles. Back on Earth, we humans haven't fully given up our destructive ways. We're still generating huge piles of garbage, and the rainforest has shrunk to a fraction of what it used to be, and the last gorillas and rhinos and elephants are gone. But thanks to the Kowalski-Gibson equation, we've made progress. We aren't heating up the Earth the way we used to. Our population has stopped growing to unsustainable levels. We just might make it after all. Perhaps the most surprising thing about being one of the people behind the equation is how long it took for humans to put it into use. The scientists all backed it right off the bat because they recognized how revolutionary it was. But a startling number of people had problems with the new. Old-fashioned corporations didn't want to change, so they hired lobbyists to strong-arm Congress and spent millions on disinformation campaigns. Chang and I were made out to be the bad guys. People got confused and rejected the science. Some of them even railed against it as unnatural. And the politicians actually listened to them. So it took a lot longer to implement the changes than I ever expected it would. Thankfully, Zan's greatest fears didn't come to fruition. No one has tried to use the information to destroy other people, at least as far as I know. I see the first inhabitants of the alien community. Like Zan, they're all beautiful, only now I can observe how they glide through the water. Their movements are graceful and hypnotic. I am immediately overcome by a strange sensation. It's impossible to explain, but it feels like, for the want of better words, an intensely good vibe, like hundreds of souls all feeling the same way at once. It's like being at a concert or a sporting event where everyone's happy for the exact same reasons, only far more intense. It's coming from the aliens, I realize. They communicate differently than humans do, using thoughts rather than words, and I'm picking up on it. I'm feeling them, and what I am getting is a sense of kindness and harmony. It is almost as though I am in a world without an unkind thought or a flash of anger. It's overwhelming, like being plunged into a beehive surrounded by the hum and thrum of the bees. Save for their size, the aliens all look exactly alike to me. I have to take some time and really focus to find who I'm looking for. But when I sense it, there's no doubt in my mind that I'm right. I lock onto the signal and connect with it. There's a brief sensation of being pulled through something, and then I am in her mind. She's startled at first, the same way I always was when she appeared to me. And then there's a flood of other emotions, some of which I recognize, and some of which I don't. There's disbelief, amazement, even a tiny bit of fear. But once she realizes what has happened, and who I am, and what I have done, there is relief, and warmth, and boundless joy. And even though she can't smile the way that I do, I know she's smiling, and I project the image of myself smiling into her mind as well. "Hi, Zan," I say. And that's the end of the Moonbase Alpha trilogy, Waste of Space.